The next day, at breakfast, Robb looked irritable. He snapped once each at Arya and Bran and thrice at Jon. Sansa bit her tongue twice before biting out Robb. Sansa, he mimicked. You're being ridiculous, she warned. Calm down before you make an even bigger fool of yourself. I'm not the stupid one, he said flatly. Their mother inhaled sharply, and their father frowned. Arya smirked. You're certainly not living up to that reputation, Sansa retorted. You told me. It was what happened to me. Idiotic womanly forgiveness. Where do you get off saying that? They hurt you. Really? Sansa all but shouted. Robb drew back, looking startled, and she glared at him, not giving him an inch to defend himself. They hurt me, I got over it, and I have not told you all that has happened so that you can decide that you will ruin the only friend you have with someone in the family. Do you hear me? He opened his mouth, and she sent him a look that was equal parts contempt and disappointment. Robb's back straightened, but he fell silent. Don't talk. Every time you open your mouth, you manage to say something idiotic. I'm sick of it. Just... She paused and realized that her entire family was staring at her as if they'd never seen her before. For a moment, she wanted to shout. For a long, terrifying moment, she felt her hands itch for a sword. She saw Robb falter and then start forward suddenly, looking stricken. She took a deep breath, turned, and ran. It was Jon who found her. Sansa's heart twisted when she saw him. So young, so unscarred. The man who had abandoned her wasn't here. Neither was the man who had given her a kingdom to care for and love. Robb said you'd likely be here, he told her quietly. I'm glad he didn't come himself, she replied. Everyone's worried about you. Jon tucked himself against the heavy stone wall. Head pillowed in his arms, resting on his knees, dark hair curling over his pale forearms. Lady Catelyn just about started to yell at Robb after you left. I think you've managed to pretty much terrify Bran. Sansa didn't turn to look at him. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry everyone, just... I got angry. Sansa, Jon said, quiet and careful as a kitten's first wandering steps into the wider world. Did I ever do something to hurt you? You left me. No, she said. No, you've never done anything. I've been awful to you, Jon, and you've only ever been kind in return. You're a better person than anyone I could name. He sounded startled when he spoke. Then, you said that people hurt you. His voice turned slightly rueful. I think Lord Stark's going to tear apart Winterfell by sundown, trying to find out who. He tried to ask Robb, but he refused to say. Robb's always wanted to solve every problem that comes his way, Sansa said acidly. He's acting ridiculous. I told him there's nothing that he can do. Nothing anyone can do. It doesn't even affect so many people. It was just a dream. But if Robb actually paid attention to what I said instead of running off on his own assumptions, we'd all be much happier. Just a dream? Sansa turned to face him. She saw him wince. Her back was to the open window, and it would be so easy for her to fall, but he didn't mention it, nor attempt to pull her back. For that, she was grateful. Yes, just a dream. She didn't smile, but her face did soften. The kind that seems to go on forever. Why was Robb angry at me? Because he wants to be angry at someone, and you're the easiest target, she said tiredly. He's going to be insufferable tomorrow too. Watch and see. Jon sighed and reached forward to capture her hands. I'm sorry. For what? She asked, honestly puzzled. That you're feeling this bad? His thumb rubbed over her knuckles, and he grinned. Come on. I think Lady Catelyn's even asked the kitchens to make lemon cakes. Sansa let him escort her down. When he hesitated at the mouth of the turret, pulling away, she felt ashamed Jon was willing to make her feel better, coax her down from the towers, and he didn't do it for any sort of acknowledgement. Sansa had taken advantage of that. She turned to face him, head high and eyes sharp. "Stay beside me," she ordered. "If Robb tries to talk to me, you've full freedom to stab him." The solemn expression on his face faded in favor of boyish glee. Sansa laughed, laced her arm in his, and let him lead her to the keep. At dinner, she dragged Robb out of the room and hissed in his ear, "The gods would tonight." He looked at her, and then he nodded and left. Sansa took the wooden sword, a water skin, and 2 cloaks, because Robb always forgot his own. In the Godswood, she waited for as long as she could and then took the sword out and began to practice one of the forms Robb had taught her. A moment later, she heard the crunch of a leaf under someone's foot and froze. Robb was never good at sneaking. If people had wanted to find him, it would have been easy. If this were him, she should have heard him coming ages ago. "Who's there?" she asked, feeling her back straighten. There was no answer. The red leaves fluttered in a stray breeze, and Sansa felt her heart begin to race. A moment later, Lady had bounded to her side from her quiet position at one of the pools, back bunched tight. Sansa lifted her sword where Lady snarled and called grimly, "Come out, before you regret it." Another long pause, and then Jon stepped out of the shadows, eyes wide and lips pressed into a thin line. "Jon?" Sansa asked slowly. "What are you doing here?" "What am I? What are you doing?" He walked closer, only to freeze when Lady pulled her lips back and growled, low and deep and barely loud enough to be heard. "Why are you holding a sword?" "It's a long story." She paused and patted Lady's head lightly, carefully. She knew that she looked distrustful, looked wary, her head shadowed and her sword outstretched. He was still gaping at her. Slowly, eyes flicking from sword to direwolf to her practiced stance, his mouth shut. "You tell Arya that playing with swords is unladylike," Jon said suddenly, eyes dark and furious. "You let your friends call her horseface because she doesn't follow your expectations of what a proper lady should be like. You tattle to your mother if she spends more than an hour a day practicing what she loves, and you're here doing the same thing?" He started forward, and Lady snarled, once unabashedly loud, and then leapt at him, tumoring both of them so that he landed on his back. "Lady," Sansa hissed, "Lady, back off right now." Jon choked under Lady's paws, hands scrabbling for purchase in the slick grass. Sansa stepped forward after a long hesitation. She didn't know what had gotten into her direwolf, and she didn't want to admit to her fear, but it was there nonetheless. Lady whined into her touch when Sansa brushed her back and slowly backed away, leaving Jon motionless and prone on the ground, blue-black bruises lining his throat. Jon awoke slowly, the world muzzy with pain and exhaustion. He tried to stretch. His arm was twisted beneath him at an honestly painful angle, cutting off all the blood flowed to his fingers but couldn't. Because he was tied up. Legs bound to each other, hands tied to opposing elbows, a gag in his mouth. He tried to hiss something out, work his jaw to spit out the offending cloth invading his mouth, but the only result was a dull pain flaring through his throat, deep enough to leave him gasping. A moment later, he heard voices. "You tied up Jon," a boy whispered, sounding somewhere between amused and angry. Through the ache in his temples, he recognized Robb. "Sansa, what were you thinking?" It came back to him with a sudden rush, and he fought off unmanly whimpers in favor of trying to eavesdrop on them once more. He rolled slightly to get slightly more comfortable, and a low growl made him stop. Lady, who was almost unnoticeable in the shadows, was staring at him with a coldly dismissive expression. "I wasn't," Sansa replied. "Lady just leapt at him." "And then you tied him up." "I thought he was dead," she bit out. "I thought Lady killed him. When it turned out she didn't, I was afraid that you wouldn't come, and I needed a way to keep him here so that I could bring him back to the keep, so I tied him up, yes." Robb snickered. Where did you even get things to tie him up with? My spare cloak. Robb exploded into laughter. Sansa hit him. Jon heard that clearly enough, and then he was tipping over, precarious balance lost and face flattened against the snow. He heard footsteps, and then Robb fell into laughter once more. It was Sansa who dragged him upright and winced at the glare he shot her. Take out the gag, Sansa, Robb said, once he'd regained some of his breath. Jon won't shout. I won't, will I? She pulled the strip of cloth out of his mouth, just in time for Jon to inhale sharply, ready to shout. He choked as pain flared through his bruised throat. She squeaked when he flinched, full-bodied, and fell against her skirts. Robb snickered, and Jon felt his cheeks flush angrily, but then it seemed that Robb managed to find some mercy inside him. He helped Jon up, cut his bonds, and handed him a water skin full of cold, fresh water that managed to lessen the ache in his throat. Why did your dire wolf attack me? He demanded, once he'd gotten under control. Sansa avoided his eyes. You were angry. Lady gets protective. She choked me. She bowed her head. It wasn't because I told her to, Jon. I'm sorry about it. Lady reacted to my fear, and she attacked you, and it was my fault. It is my fault. She knelt, her braids slipping over her shoulder. I'm sorry. If you wish to go to either mother or father, She'll stop you, Robb interjected. I will stand by your decision, she said, throwing an irritable look at him over her shoulder before turning back to him. But I hope you can forgive me. Jon stared into her blue eyes and felt his anger slip away, as it always did when faced with Sansa's full attention. Tell me what's going on, he said instead of apologizing for some unknown transgression. There was a long silence when he said that. Robb shifted uneasily. Sansa looked startled, and then a series of expressions flickered across her face, too quick for him to identify. When she bowed her head, shadows almost swallowed her features. It's a long story, she said, and when her face lifted to the moonlight, he saw only wariness in it. Wariness and a sort of determination that transformed her mother's features into something like the old Free Queens of the North. But if you will hear it, I will not stop. Robb suddenly cut in before Jon could reply, sounding old beyond his years. This isn't something you take back, Jon. Some things can't be unheard. Just be careful. Jon licked his lips. What would you suggest? He asked quietly. That you sit and listen, Robb replied, voice soft, just louder than the wind that ran through the godswood. And then you sit and think on it once more. This'll change your life. Sansa shifted and Robb nodded to her. We're Starks, all of us. We endure, and we don't turn our faces from evils done. And when our claws are sharp and the night is dark, we tear their throats out. He clasped Sansa's shoulder, and for a moment, both their faces looked fierce and alien as a wolf's. You are one of us. I think you should hear what Sansa will tell you. But if you can't find it in you, I will not blame you. Jon shook his head, trying to form the words. Is it that important? Yes, he said immediately. Jon nodded. His eyes flicked from Sansa to Robb, from Lady to the weeping face of the weirwood tree. We don't turn our faces, he thought, and straightened his back firmly, ignoring the bruises. Tell me, he said. Robb saw disbelief flash across Jon's face at Sansa's words, and then a cool blankness that masked all emotion. The only time it cracked was when she leaned forward and whispered something in his ear, something that made Jon swallow and pale and suddenly look like he'd been struck in the face. Sansa pulled away. If you wish me to say it, I shall. It is your decision. Her eyes swept over them both, cool and calm, and then she turned to the sky, the darkness slowly giving way to a soft gray shade that seemed to make everything quieter, as if the godswood was as distant from Winterfell as the moon. Dawn will soon be upon us, she said. I shall be missed if I don't head back. Take care, both of you, and make sure you wash your face before you come to breakfast. It won't do to have all three of us with black circles under our eyes." Robb nodded, and she didn't quite smile. Sansa rarely did these days. She had a way of flashing her teeth in front of those she wished to fool, but it was an inch too wide to be called a true smile. For him, and for Jon, it seemed her face relaxed and softened into something that approximated a smile, though it was nowhere near the bright ones from before. When this began, when she came to him and whispered of a dream where everyone died and she was left, scarcely alive and scarcely wishing to be so, Robb had stared into eyes that spoke nothing but truth, eyes that anyone else would have named mad. "You will live," he'd sworn, and gathered her in his arms. "You will live, Sansa, and you will laugh, and everyone who tried to turn your soul to darkness will die. I'll protect you, I promise." He'd said it once, when the air was cold and Sansa looked chapped and weary and more bitter than any 9-year-old had the right to. She had not laughed, nor sneered as he might have expected, only placed cold fingers on his arm and whispered, "I hope so." "So the North declares independence, I'm declared king, we win the war, and then what? Wait until the Targaryen exile comes back on her dragons." "You're not going to like it." "Sansa, we abolished the Iron Throne. That much power makes anyone go mad. No, we split Westeros into 7 kingdoms as it was before the Targaryens came." "Abolish the part? Are you mad? What are we going to do when we need food in the middle of winter? When we need steel or gold or men?" "We already have treaties with the Reach and the Westerlands. We renegotiate." "Do you know if we can?" "The North's grown and population has grown. If we become our own kingdom, we'll need to assert more control, need more holdfasts, establish more houses, and why would the Reach want to, in the first place?" "Because we'll pay them." "With what gold?" "Not with gold, dear brother, with things that we actually have. Furs, wood. We've better carvers and wood hardeners than anyone south of the Riverlands." "Southerners won't want furs, Sansa." "They will in winter, and I promise you that the winter will be colder than ever before." "Do we have enough population of trees or animals to turn such a profit?" "I'll read up on it." Kara had come to Winterfell a ways back, when her mother got tired of having her pretty cheekbones bruised by the man her father wed her to. She was a serving girl in the kitchens where it was safe and warm, and she's learned to keep her head down and mouth shut. Everyone knew both Lord and Lady Stark didn't take kindly to gossip, and showed them the gates quickly and firmly. Old Nan was an exception, but she was too old for anyone, including Lord Stark, to silence. But during the nights the girls whispered as nobody could stop, and Kara had learned far more in the years inside the castle than she ever had in all her time with her mother in Wintertown. Everyone knew that the Stark children, well, all of them were unique in their own way. Lena was the oldest of the girls, and she liked Robb best of all, so the rest of the girls did as well. She said that Robb was good with a sword, good enough to make you tingle inside, Lena said once when she was drunk off her arse, a notorious flirt but never taking it beyond kisses. The others laughed and swooned and preened whenever he was near, and Kara could see what they saw in him. Handsome to a fault, honorable, an heir. There was nothing to dislike. But she rather thought that if there was a person she admired from afar, it'd be Lady Sansa. She was quieter than her siblings, always embroidering cloth for the poor Wintertown. Kara knew that, well, her newest brother wouldn't have had clothes on his back if not for her generosity and walking in the godswood. She was beautiful too, like a weirwood tree, all with red hair and bark-pale skin. But Kara knew that sometimes it was selfishness hiding behind piety, and cruelty behind beauty. Her father had driven that home easily enough. She'd have been content to watch the lady from afar and admire her, keep away as a base-born girl ought to do, until that day. She'd carried white linens, freshly washed and cleaned, from the cupboards out to the beds. It had been a mistake piling the crisp cloths so high that she couldn't see in front of her, but she checked and there was no one in the rooms, no one in the hallways. From where he'd come, Kara did not know, but the moment was firmly entrenched in her mind. She'd walked and bumped into the Greyjoy ward, and red wine had spilled over all the clean cloths in her arms, and she'd stared in sheer horror at the sight. He'd gone just as still and silent, and she saw the moment his face changed from shock to fury, the exact moment when his hand raised as if to strike her. The blow never fell. "Theon!" a voice exclaimed, sharp enough to startle him, and Kara flinched into the wall as the Lady Sansa appeared out of nowhere, hair unbound and hanging like fire down her back. She sighed and waved him away, and reached a hand out to Kara, calm, as if nothing had happened. "Come on," she said kindly. "I'm sure it isn't as bad as it looks." "They're freshly washed," Kara wailed, trying not to let her tears fall. "Mags'll fire me. I know it. Oh, I'm so sorry, Lady Sansa." But the lady only took the top layer of linen with an easy look, and then she nodded firmly, said, "Follow me," and walked away. They bleached the cloth together, and when it didn't take fully, the lady only told Kara not to worry. A day later, Kara was in the Great Hall, serving wine to the Stark family, when she heard the Lady Catelyn ask, "What happened to the white linen, Sansa?" Meg said you mentioned something, but she wasn't entirely sure what you meant. "I stained the cloth," she said, and the lie wasn't even identified by any of her family. Kara gaped, and Lady Sansa's eyes met hers across the hall, and she winked. A year later, on Lady Sansa's name day, Kara entered Lord Stark's solar with a tray of lemon cakes. The whole family was there, and she was gathering the already present trays with careful, non-obstructive moments when Lord Stark asked, "What do you want for your name day?" There was a bare hesitation, and then Lady Sansa said, "A sworn shield, father," and the whole world seemed to stop. Turning 10 was a milestone. The Starks rarely did big celebrations for their children, and even if they did, their gifts were simple, all save for the 10th name day. The Lord Robb had asked for a sand steed from Dorne, and they'd given it, after many attempts at cajoling otherwise. But a sworn sword was a lifetime service. There was no going back. "A sworn shield?" Lady Catelyn asked. "Sansa, don't be ridiculous." "A sworn shield," repeated Sansa. "Someone to bear my favors and protect me. I am to leave home, mother. I want someone to stand beside me." "Sansa," Lady Catelyn said helplessly. Kara understood her dilemma very well. Who would pledge the rest of their life for a 10-year-old girl, no matter her beauty or status? What knight would do such a thing? There was silence. Nobody would answer, Kara knew, and then the lady would break and weep. Pity stirred in Kara's heart. "I'll do it," said a voice, and everyone turned to see Jon Snow, Lord Stark's bastard, step forward. Kara would have gaped if she weren't busy trying to become one with the tapestry at her back. "Jon, take a," Lord Stark began, only to be interrupted by Lady Sansa. "Oh, father, could he?" She turned, eyes large and pleading, and Lord Stark visibly wavered. "Ned," said Lady Catelyn, "this is entirely—" "Mother, I just want—" "I'll do it," said Snow, looking somewhere near desperate. Lord Robb, behind him, sported a grin that continued to grow wider and wider. At that, Lady Sansa grabbed his sleeve. She glared at her parents, head held high and furious, and then stalked out, dragging Jon Snow with her. Kara grabbed the closest thing she could and fled, right on their heels. It took her a moment to find a safe spot, but hidden behind a tapestry on the second floor, she found enough privacy to muffle her laughter into her sleeve. Lady Sansa was a good actress, but when Jon Snow said he'd be her sworn shield, she looked exactly like she had when she'd lied to her mother for Kara. If she hadn't planned it with him before, Kara would eat the copper pot in front of her. Good for you, she thought. Everyone knew that highborn ladies weren't safe from their husbands if they turned out violent. Bruises were the lot of every woman, from the small folk to the queen. If Lady Sansa wished for a shield against that, a man to protect her from those fists, she deserved one, and Kara would never tell a single person that this whole thing had been contrived. "Son," Ned said, "you don't have to do this." "I know," Jon replied. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Being a sworn shield's a lifetime of responsibility. It's far too long for you to swear yourself thus." Jon remembered Sansa's long, pale fingers and the way she let her shoulders slump when Jon or Robb entered a room. He remembered the way she held the sword, her expression, almost savage, the untempered fury almost frightening. He remembered what she had told him, "Once the Kingsguard beat me." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," he told his father firmly. Firmly enough to startle both of them. "I was thinking of taking the black. What's the difference? There I swear my vows to a heart tree, here I swear to my sister. I know which one I'd rather do, father." "Jon," he said. "Jon, it's not so simple as that. She had no right to ask it of you, and we've already had this conversation." Jon tried to stop talking. "All that happened was that he got angrier. After breakfast yesterday, she told me that if I wanted to walk away, she wouldn't hold it against me. She told me that she didn't want to be responsible for any unhappiness on my part. I've spoken to her, father, and we've decided that I'll swear my vows within the moon's turn." Sansa had said it. She'd said it before, and she'd said it after. This whole thing had begun because she'd not wanted him to become part of the Night's Watch. When he'd asked what else he ought to do, she'd recommended becoming her sworn shield. Robb had supported it. And then it had become a question of how, rather than should, and well, the gist was that Sansa hadn't pushed him into anything. It was his decision, and all three of them knew it. "If you're fixed on this, I won't turn you from it," Ned said quietly, after a long pause. "But it will be a long and lonely life, Jon. One that I wouldn't wish on you." "I will be beside my sister," Jon replied. "I will be beside my family. There is no one else I'd rather be with." Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and awkward. Jon's father was unhappy, and Lady Catelyn was likely even more unhappy, and he guessed that Arya might be the angriest of all. But hopefully they'd get over it soon, because Jon knew he'd not be backing down, not from this. "Is that all, father?" he asked, as courteous as he could without appearing disrespectful. He nodded, sighing, and Jon took his leave. There were things he needed to plan. Things they needed to plan. All three of them. Sansa had told them of things that they'd tested quietly. It was true. How else could she have known the name of the Targaryens surviving across the narrow sea? How else could she have described the look of Castle Black, or the inheritance cultures of the Dornish, or the gold sheen of Tyrell roses? Jon hadn't believed in the beginning, but now he was sure that Sansa was telling the truth, and he was even more frightened for what would come. She predicted death for all of them. He left the solar with quick, sharp movements. Sansa caught up to him soon enough, a smile curling over her lips like a sunrise. "What did he say?" "That I didn't have to do this," he replied. Sansa stopped, hand catching his elbow and forcing him to stop as well. Do you know that?" she asked slowly. "You don't?" "I don't want you to feel bad about it later. Swear yourself because you want to, nothing else." Jon closed his eyes for a heartbeat, and remembered that Sansa had once confessed to nightmares where she watched her father's head drip blood, or Robb's neck cut open, or Rickon's pale, bloodied lips as he was interred. "Sometimes I can't sleep," she told Jon, and Jon could hear what she didn't say. "I'm too weak." Fear does not mean that we are not brave. "I am afraid," he said plainly. "I am afraid of what this means. I am afraid of what is yet to come. I am afraid because you are the strongest person I know and you feel yourself not strong enough. But I am not afraid of swearing my sword and being shield to you, Sansa." She had gone pale at his words, eyes shining and face as still as stone. When he finished, she flushed a bright red, looking startled and achingly vulnerable across the smooth planes of her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, John. You don't know how much it means to hear that. I am trying. But I'm not that strong, you know, just lucky. The only reason I survived was because nobody thought I was worth anything." "And now you're here," he told her. "You're here, and you're alive, and you've me and Rob and the entire family behind you. They didn't break you, Sansa, and that's something I don't think anyone else could have survived." She sighed, but her lips were still curved upwards. Sansa didn't believe him, but they had time. He would show her. Jon knelt against the earth, head held high and proud. "I will shield your back and wield my sword in your defense," he said. "I swear to act in such a manner that brings only honor to you and yours. I pledge my life to you, for you. My sword is yours, Lady Sansa of the House Stark, from this day until my last day. I swear it by the old gods and the new." Sansa breathed deep. Her hands were trembling, slightly, and she could feel something hovering just out of reach, something heavy and weighted and warm. "I vow that you shall always have a place at my table and in my home," she said, and her eyes did not move from Jon's pale gray ones, not an inch. "And that I shall ask no service of you that may bring you dishonor. I accept your oath, Sir Jon of House Stark. I swear it by the old gods and the new." Jon bowed his head, and she allowed herself to smile, faint and flickering, and knelt to place her hands beneath his elbows, lifting him to his feet. "As my sworn shield, there is little protection you can offer with a wooden sword," she said, and Jon's head snapped to hers. The sudden hope written across his face made her smile again, sharp and true. A wolf's smile. Sansa took the wrapped package that lay hidden behind the tree and handed it to Jon carefully. He opened it, and she could see the awe on his face as he lifted the sword that she had commissioned a few days before. The blade was blue-white, the steel sharp and honed, the pommel a wolf with jaws open and snarling. "Thank you," he said, eyes flicking up to meet hers. Sansa nodded and stepped away. Guiding him forwards, it was Robb who stepped forwards first to congratulate them, and the others followed slowly. When her father wrapped her in his arms, all warm cloth and heavy muscle, she pressed her face to his shoulder and stifled a little shudder. Later that night, Jon snuck into her chambers with lemon cakes, and Robb followed with wine. Sansa ate and drank and laughed and laughed and laughed, until her stomach felt swollen and her head light from lack of air. Everything spun hazily. This was what she'd sought. She realized suddenly this was what had fluttered in the gods wood as Jon swore to her, this camaraderie, this safety she had almost forgotten. In her old life she had loved Robb best, but he hadn't done the same. Arya and Bran and Rickon were either too young or too different, and Sansa had never been good friends with Jon. The only people she'd had were inconstant, not bloodless brothers as her siblings boasted. Sansa had never been loved less, she knew, but she had been lonely. And she wasn't in this life, and she never would be. It was a heady feeling. This is war, Sansa thought, and held the sword and stood tall in the sunset leaves of the weirwood tree. This is a war, and this is a game, and I will gamble, and I will steal all your lives from the jaws of death. There is no room for weakness in me. My thoughts as a reader. I've just read the end of the first chapter, and I have to say, the story really holds tight. Here we see Sansa in a completely different light, more confident, sharper in her words, and it shows even in her arguments with Robb. The way she changes the family dynamic is genuinely impressive. What I especially liked is that the author doesn't forget the political side. The dialogues between Sansa and Robb about the North's future feel unexpectedly realistic and well thought out. It gives the story a real depth. You can tell this is not just a retelling of events, but a whole strategic vision. I also want to highlight the scene with Jon and his oath. It's presented powerfully, yet in a very intimate and personal way. It's the kind of moment that makes you believe Sansa could truly change the course of history in this alternate reality. Overall, the second part of the first chapter leaves a strong impression. The story keeps unfolding in unexpected directions while staying atmospheric and profound. It's the kind of fanfic that doesn't just make you listen, it makes you reflect on what could have been if George Martin himself had chosen to take the plot in this direction.